The power went out at 3 a.m. My daughter's heart monitor started beeping its final warning, battery dying. In 4 hours the machines keeping her alive would shut down forever. But this wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately cut our power. Someone wanted my sick child to die. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday morning when I first saw Linda Mitchell standing in my driveway, clipboard in hand, looking like she owned the entire neighborhood. Which, in her mind, she probably did. "Mr. Rodriguez," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk." I had just gotten home from the hospital after another sleepless night with my daughter Emma. At 7 years old, she was fighting the battle of her life against a rare heart condition that required constant monitoring. The portable heart monitor never left her side, and neither did the fear that gripped my chest every time I heard it beep irregularly. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Mitchell?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite my exhaustion. Linda was the HOA president of our Willowbrook subdivision, and she took that title more seriously than most people take their marriage vows. She was known throughout the neighborhood as someone who would measure your grass with a ruler and fine you if it was a quarter-inch too long. "Your fence," she said, pointing her pen at the small wooden fence I had installed around my backyard 3 weeks earlier. "It's not the approved color." I blinked at her, wondering if I had heard correctly. "Excuse me?" The HOA guidelines clearly state that all fencing must be painted in colonial white or natural oak stain. "Yours appears to be weathered gray." She flipped through her clipboard like she was reading from the Bible itself. "That's a violation of Section 4.2 of the Community Standards." My heart sank. I had specifically chosen that fence color because it matched the medical equipment company's outdoor generator housing that powered Emma's backup systems. Everything in our lives had to coordinate around her medical needs now. "Mrs. Mitchell, I can explain." "No need for explanations," she cut me off. "You have 72 hours to repaint it to compliance or face a $500 fine. And if it's not corrected within a week after that, we'll be forced to take legal action." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the wet pavement like a countdown timer. She had no idea what our family was going through. How could she? To her, we were just another house number to control. That evening, I sat with Emma on the couch as she colored in her favorite princess book. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside her, a sound that had become both comforting and terrifying. Each beep meant she was still with us, still fighting. "Daddy, why was that lady so angry today?" Emma asked without looking up from her coloring. "She wasn't angry, sweetheart. She just has rules she thinks are important." "More important than being nice?" Her question hit me harder than Linda's threats. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that some adults care more about paint colors than people? The next morning, I called Linda to explain our situation. Maybe if she understood why the fence color mattered, she would show some compassion. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to understand something about my family's situation," I began when she answered. "Mr. Rodriguez, I don't have time for sob stories. Rules are rules. My daughter Emma has a serious heart condition. She needs medical equipment that runs 24/7. The fence color was chosen to match the generator housing for her backup power systems. It's not about aesthetics, it's about her health." There was a pause on the other end. For a moment, I thought I had gotten through to her. "That's unfortunate," she said finally, "but your personal circumstances don't override community standards. Everyone has their problems, Mr. Rodriguez. If we made exceptions for everyone's hardships, we'd have chaos." I felt my blood pressure rise. "This isn't about convenience, Mrs. Mitchell. This is about my daughter's life." 72 hours, she repeated and hung up. I spent the next day researching the HOA bylaws, looking for any provision that might help us. I found a clause about medical necessity exemptions, but it required approval from the Architectural Review Board, which Linda chaired. That Thursday, Emma had a particularly bad episode. Her heart rate spiked to dangerous levels, and we spent the entire day in the emergency room. The doctors adjusted her medication and warned us that her condition was becoming more unpredictable. The stress was taking its toll on her small body. When we got home that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, there was a bright orange violation notice stapled to our front door. "Final notice, fence violation. Immediate compliance required or legal action will commence." I crumpled the paper in my fist. Emma was barely managing to walk from the car to the house, and this woman was worried about paint colors. Friday morning brought another surprise. I woke up to find Linda in my backyard with a man in a uniform, taking pictures of the fence from every angle. "What's going on here?" I called out as I rushed outside. Documenting the violation for our legal proceedings, Linda said without looking at me. This is Code Enforcement Officer Jake Morrison. The officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, I'm required to investigate HOA complaints, but I have to tell you, this seems like a pretty minor issue. Minor? Linda snapped. Property values are at stake here. If everyone just does whatever they want, this entire community will go to hell. I looked at Emma's bedroom window, where I could see her small face peeking through the curtains. She looked scared. Mrs. Mitchell, I said, fighting to keep my voice calm, I'm begging you to reconsider. My daughter is very sick, and this stress is affecting our entire family. Can't we work out some kind of compromise? I've offered you a solution, she replied coldly. Paint the fence the correct color. End of discussion. That weekend, I borrowed money from my brother to hire painters to fix the fence. It broke my heart to spend money we desperately needed for Emma's medical bills on something so trivial, but I couldn't risk legal fees on top of everything else. The painters came Monday morning and finished by afternoon. I called Linda to inform her the violation had been corrected. I'll inspect it tomorrow, she said curtly. Tuesday morning, Linda showed up with her clipboard and measuring tape. She spent 20 minutes examining every inch of the fence, clearly hoping to find something else to complain about. It's acceptable, she finally admitted, sounding almost disappointed. I thought our nightmare was over. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received another violation notice. This time it was about Emma's medical equipment visible in our backyard. The letter stated that medical devices and equipment must be screened from public view in accordance with community standards. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The equipment that kept my daughter alive was now an eyesore that violated HOA rules. I called Linda immediately. Mrs. Mitchell, the equipment you're complaining about is life support equipment for my daughter. I can't just hide it behind a decorative screen. Mr. Rodriguez, I understand your daughter has health issues, but that doesn't give you the right to turn your backyard into a medical facility. Other residents have complained about the appearance. Other residents? Who? That's confidential. But the equipment must be properly screened within 30 days, or you'll face another fine. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, staring at the violation notice. My hands were shaking with anger and helplessness. This woman was systematically attacking everything that kept Emma alive, hiding behind rules and regulations like they were sacred scripture. That evening, Emma asked why I looked so sad. Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. But she was already worrying. I could see it in her eyes. Children with chronic illnesses grow up fast. They learn to read the stress in their parents' faces, to understand that their very existence creates burdens for the people they love most. Is it because of my machines? She asked quietly. My heart broke. No, baby. Never think that. You are the most important thing in the world to me. Nothing else matters. But as I tucked her into bed that night, listening to the steady beep of her heart monitor, I realized that Linda Mitchell was slowly destroying our family's peace. Every violation notice, every threatening phone call, every cold interaction was adding stress to an already impossible situation. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting to address this publicly. Maybe if the other residents heard our story, they would pressure Linda to back down. The meeting was held in the community center on a Thursday evening. About 30 residents were there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Linda sat at a table at the front, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. When it came time for resident concerns, I stood up. My name is Carlos Rodriguez and I live on Maple Street. I want to talk about the harassment my family has been facing from the HOA. Linda's eyes narrowed. Mr. Rodriguez, if you have a complaint about proper enforcement of community standards. Let me finish, I said firmly. My 7-year-old daughter has a serious heart condition. She requires medical equipment to stay alive. Over the past month, this board has issued violation notices targeting everything related to her medical care, from the fence color that matches her equipment to the life support devices themselves. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see neighbors I barely knew looking at me with sympathy. My daughter is fighting for her life every single day. The last thing our family needs is harassment about paint colors and equipment visibility. I'm asking this board to show some human compassion and grant medical exemptions for our necessary equipment. I sat down to scattered applause. Linda waited for it to die down before responding. Mr. Rodriguez's personal situation is unfortunate, but this board has a responsibility to all residents. We cannot selectively enforce rules based on individual circumstances. That would be unfair to everyone who follows the guidelines. An elderly man in the back row stood up. Linda, for crying out loud, we're talking about a sick child. Can't you make an exception? Rules are rules, Harold, Linda replied. If we start making exceptions, where does it end? Do we ignore violations for everyone with a sob story? She had just called my daughter's life-threatening illness a sob story. The room fell silent. A woman near the front spoke up. I've seen the Rodriguez family's equipment. It's barely visible unless you're specifically looking for it. This seems like unnecessary persecution. The architectural committee has reviewed the situation and determined that violations exist, Linda said, her voice getting sharper. This board will not be swayed by emotional appeals. I left that meeting feeling more hopeless than ever. Linda had made it clear that she would rather see my daughter suffer than bend her precious rules. But the worst was yet to come. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA's law firm. They were taking legal action against us for continued willful violations of community standards. The letter demanded immediate compliance and payment of $2,000 in fines, or they would place a lien on our house. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Between Emma's medical bills and my reduced work schedule to care for her, we were barely keeping our heads above water financially. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had reached this point. The next morning brought the call I had been dreading. Emma's cardiologist, Dr. Martinez, wanted to see us immediately. Test results showed that her condition was worsening. She would need surgery within the next month, followed by an even more intensive monitoring period. The good news, Dr. Martinez explained, is that this surgery could significantly improve her quality of life. The challenging part is that she'll need 24/7 monitoring for at least 3 months afterward. That means more equipment at home, not less. I thought about Linda Mitchell and her clipboard and I felt physically sick. That afternoon I made a decision. I called every local news station I could find and told them our story. Maybe public pressure would accomplish what compassion couldn't. A reporter from Channel 7 came out the next day to interview us. Emma was having a good day, so she was able to talk a little bit about her condition and the machines that helped her. When the reporter asked how she felt about the HOA complaints, Emma said something that made me cry. I'm sorry my machines are ugly. I don't want to make anyone sad. The story aired that Friday evening. Within hours, our phone was ringing nonstop with calls from neighbors, strangers, and advocacy groups offering support. Someone started a GoFundMe to help with our legal expenses. The mayor's office called to express concern. But Linda Mitchell's response was swift and vicious. She contacted the news station claiming I was using my daughter's illness to avoid following rules that everyone else had to follow. She accused me of seeking attention and money through exploitation of a sick child. I was beyond anger now. I was entering a territory I had never experienced before, a place where someone's cruelty toward my dying child activated something primal and fierce inside me. Saturday morning, I was outside checking Emma's equipment when I saw Linda walking down the sidewalk with another violation notice in her hand. This time she had noticed that one of Emma's monitors was plugged into an outdoor electrical outlet, which violated some obscure rule about exterior electrical use. Mrs. Mitchell, I called out before she could post the notice. We need to talk. She turned, clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. Mr. Rodriguez, I have nothing to say to you. After that ridiculous news story, my legal counsel has advised me to communicate only through official channels. Your legal counsel? I stepped closer. You brought lawyers into a fight with a 7-year-old? I brought lawyers into a fight with someone who thinks rules don't apply to him. These aren't just rules, Linda. You're not protecting property values. You're torturing a sick child and her family for sport. Her face hardened. Your daughter's condition is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to this community. My daughter is part of this community. She's a 7-year-old girl who loves princess movies and chocolate ice cream. She colors pictures for hours because it's one of the few things that doesn't tire her out. She asks me every day if she's going to die, and I have to lie and tell her everything will be okay. And you, my voice broke. You're making her apologize for being alive. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in Linda's eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Drama doesn't change facts, she said. 30 days to address the electrical violation or we proceed with the lien. She turned to walk away, but I wasn't done. Linda, wait. My voice was quiet now, exhausted. What if it was your child? She stopped but didn't turn around. It's not. But what if it was? What if your child was dying, and some stranger decided that paint colors were more important than their life? What would you want that person to do? She stood there for a long moment, her back still to me. When she finally turned around, her expression was stone cold. I would want that person to follow the rules like everyone else. Because that's what keeps civilization from collapsing into chaos. She walked away, leaving me standing in my driveway holding a violation notice for the crime of keeping my daughter alive. That night, Emma had her worst episode yet. Her heart rate became so erratic that the monitor's alarms were going off constantly. We rushed to the hospital where she spent 3 days in intensive care. The stress was accelerating her condition's progression, the doctors said. She would need surgery even sooner than planned. While Emma was in the hospital, I came home one evening to find that someone had vandalized our fence. The words "Rule Breaker" were spray-painted across it in red letters. I had no proof it was Linda, but the timing felt like more than coincidence. I was repainting the fence the next morning when my neighbor Tom walked over. "Carlos, this has gone too far," he said. "That woman is out of control." "I don't know what else to do, Tom. I can't afford to fight her legally and I can't move Emma right now. She's too sick." "What if we fought back differently?" I looked up from my painting. "What do you mean?" "What if we voted Linda out of the HOA presidency?" "I've been talking to other neighbors. A lot of people are disgusted by how she's treating your family." The idea had never occurred to me. HOA politics seemed so far removed from my daily struggle to keep Emma alive. How would that work? "We call a special election. We need signatures from 30% of the homeowners to force a vote. I think we can get that." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Tom was right. Word of Linda's behavior had spread throughout the neighborhood, amplified by the news coverage. Many residents were horrified to learn that their HOA president was targeting a sick child's medical equipment. Within a week, Tom had collected enough signatures to force a recall election. Linda's response was to double down. She sent a letter to every resident claiming that I was leading a mob campaign to undermine community standards. She warned that removing her would lead to chaos and plummeting property values. But something had shifted in the neighborhood's mood. Parents looked at Emma and saw their own children. They imagined being in our shoes, and they were appalled by Linda's lack of compassion. The recall election was scheduled for a Saturday morning in the community center. Emma was still in the hospital, so I almost didn't attend. But Tom convinced me that my presence was important. When I walked into the community center, I was shocked by the turnout. Nearly every seat was filled and people were standing along the walls. I had never seen so many neighbors in one place. Linda called the meeting to order, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. She gave a speech about the importance of consistent rule enforcement and the dangers of emotional decision-making. She never mentioned Emma by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. When it came time for residents to speak, person after person stood up to criticize Linda's handling of our situation. Harold, the elderly man from the previous meeting, was particularly pointed. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, he said. "I've seen Linda fine people for Christmas decorations left up too long in grass that was half an inch too tall. But targeting a dying child's medical equipment? That's not community leadership. That's cruelty." A mother with young children spoke next. "My kids play with Emma sometimes. She's the sweetest little girl you could imagine. The idea that we would prioritize paint colors over her health is shameful. Linda Mitchell doesn't represent my values or this community's values." One after another, residents stood up to share similar sentiments. I was moved to tears by their support, but I was also watching Linda's face. With each speech, she seemed to withdraw further into herself, her expression growing colder and more bitter. When the speaking period ended, it was time to vote. The ballot was simple. Should Linda Mitchell be removed as HOA president? Yes or no? While the votes were being counted, I stepped outside to call the hospital and check on Emma. Her condition had stabilized, but she was asking when she could come home. I promised her it would be soon. When I returned to the community center, the results were being announced. Linda Mitchell had been removed from office by a margin of 142 votes to 23. The room erupted in applause, but I felt no sense of victory. All I felt was exhaustion and the desperate hope that this nightmare was finally over. Linda gathered her things and walked toward the exit without a word to anyone. But as she passed me, she leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "This isn't over," she whispered. I should have paid more attention to that threat. The new HOA board immediately voted to grant medical exemptions for all of Emma's equipment. They rescinded the pending fines and legal action. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Emma came home from the hospital 3 days later, weaker than before but happy to be back in her own bed. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, and Dr. Martinez was optimistic about the outcome. For a few days, everything seemed to return to normal. Then, on Thursday afternoon, the power went out. This wasn't unusual during storm season, so I checked the circuit breakers and called the power company. But when I went outside to look at the electrical meter, I found something that made my blood run cold. The power had been deliberately shut off. Someone had accessed the electrical meter and flipped the main disconnect switch. There were fresh scratches around the lock indicating forced entry. I immediately called 911 and the power company's emergency line. Emma's backup battery systems would only last about 4 hours before her monitors would shut down completely. The police arrived first. Officer Jennifer Walsh took one look at the situation and understood the urgency. "Sir, do you have any idea who might have done this?" I thought about Linda's parting threat, but I had no proof. "There's been an ongoing dispute with a former HOA board member, but I can't say for certain." The power company technician arrived and confirmed my worst fears. The disconnect hadn't failed naturally, someone had deliberately tampered with it. They could restore power, but it would take time to ensure the system was safe. Meanwhile, Emma's monitors were beginning to beep warnings about low battery levels. "How long do we have?" Officer Walsh asked. I looked at my watch. We had been without power for an hour. "Maybe 3 more hours before everything shuts down completely." The technician was working as fast as he could, but the damage to the electrical connections was extensive. Someone had not only shut off the power but had also damaged components to delay restoration. With 2 hours left on the batteries, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called 911 again and requested an ambulance. "We need to transport my daughter to the hospital," I told the dispatcher. "Her life support equipment is failing." As we waited for the ambulance, I held Emma in my arms. She was scared and confused about why all her machines were beeping. "Are we going back to the hospital, Daddy?" "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Until we can fix the power." "Is someone trying to hurt me?" The question nearly broke me. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that an adult has deliberately put her life in danger over fence paint and property values? "No one is trying to hurt you, baby. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, but you're safe. I promise you're safe." The ambulance arrived with full sirens, and Emma was loaded onto a stretcher with portable monitors. As we pulled away from the house, I saw neighbors gathering on their lawns, their faces filled with shock and concern. At the hospital, Emma was quickly stabilized and connected to permanent monitoring systems. Dr. Martinez was furious when he learned what had happened. "This is attempted murder," he said bluntly. "Someone knew that cutting power to your house would endanger Emma's life, and they did it anyway." The police investigation moved quickly. Security cameras from a neighbor's house showed a figure approaching our electrical meter around 3 a.m. Thursday morning. The person was wearing dark clothing and a hood, but their height and build were consistent with Linda Mitchell. When police contacted Linda for questioning, she initially denied being anywhere near our house. But when confronted with the video evidence, she changed her story. "I was just checking to see if they were stealing electricity with all their medical equipment," she claimed. "I accidentally bumped into the disconnect switch." Her story fell apart under scrutiny. The damage to the electrical system required tools and deliberate effort. It couldn't have been accidental. Linda Mitchell was arrested on charges of criminal mischief, endangering a child, and attempted murder. The local news covered her arrest extensively, and the story went viral on social media. People from around the country were outraged by what she had done. But even with Linda in jail, the damage was done. The stress of that night triggered complications in Emma's condition. Her surgery had to be moved up to the next day, and the risk factors had increased significantly. I spent the night before her surgery sitting beside her hospital bed, watching her sleep. She looked so small and fragile surrounded by all the medical equipment. I thought about Linda's question. Where does it end if we make exceptions for everyone's hardships? Maybe it ends with compassion. Maybe it ends with remembering that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. Maybe it ends with understanding that sometimes being human is more important than being right. Emma's surgery took 8 hours. Dr. Martinez came out afterward looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "The surgery went well," he told me. "We were able to repair the damaged areas of her heart. If she continues to recover at this pace, she might not need as much monitoring equipment at home." I cried tears of relief and gratitude. After months of fighting for Emma's right to exist in our own neighborhood, there was finally hope that she might be able to live more normally. Linda Mitchell was eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison for endangering a child and criminal mischief. During her sentencing hearing, she was given the opportunity to make a statement. "I want everyone to understand that I never intended to harm that child," she said. "I was only trying to protect our community's standards. Rules matter. Order matters. Without them we have chaos." Even facing prison time, she couldn't bring herself to show genuine remorse for nearly killing my daughter. Emma spent 2 weeks recovering in the hospital after her surgery. When she finally came home, the entire neighborhood was waiting to welcome her back. Someone had organized a block party, complete with princess decorations and a cake shaped like a castle. Seeing Emma's face light up as she was surrounded by neighbors who had fought for her right to live in peace was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. She was still weak and would need months of recovery, but for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked truly happy. Tom, who had led the effort to remove Linda from office, made a short speech. "Emma Rodriguez is not just Carlos's daughter," he said. "She's our neighbor, our community member, and our reminder that being human is more important than being perfect. We failed her for too long by allowing cruelty to masquerade as leadership. We won't make that mistake again." The new HOA board created the Emma Rodriguez Medical Accommodation Policy, ensuring that no family would ever again face harassment for life-saving medical equipment. They also established a community fund to help families dealing with medical emergencies. 3 months after her surgery, Emma was strong enough to attend school part-time. She still needed some monitoring equipment, but it was minimal compared to before. More importantly, she had regained her spark, her joy, her belief that the world was a good place full of people who cared about her. Linda Mitchell was released from prison after serving 18 months. She moved away from our neighborhood and I never saw her again. I heard through neighbors that she continued to blame everyone except herself for what had happened. Some people, I realized, are so invested in being right that they can never admit to being wrong, even when their wrongness nearly costs a child her life. Emma is 10 years old now and thriving. She still has to be careful about physical activity, but she plays soccer in a modified league for kids with special needs. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up so she can help other children who are sick. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when we're sitting on our back porch, next to our weathered gray fence that no one has complained about in years, Emma asks me about Linda Mitchell. "Daddy, why was she so mean to us?" It's still the hardest question I've ever been asked. How do you explain to a child that some adults lose their way so completely that they forget what really matters? "I think she forgot how to see people," I usually say. "She got so focused on rules that she stopped seeing the humans the rules were supposed to help." Will I ever forget how to see people? Never, I tell her, pulling her close. Your heart is too good for that. And watching her interact with her friends, seeing how she naturally gravitates toward the kids who are different or struggling, I know it's true. Emma's experience with cruelty has made her more compassionate, not less. She understands suffering in a way that many adults never will, and she uses that understanding to lift others up. The house next to ours went up for sale last month. The new neighbors are a young couple with a baby. When they introduced themselves, they mentioned that they had specifically chosen our neighborhood because of the story they had heard about our community coming together to protect Emma. "We want to raise our daughter somewhere that values kindness over conformity," the mother told me. I thought about Linda Mitchell and her rigid rules, about the chaos she claimed would result from showing compassion. Looking around our neighborhood now, at the kids playing together regardless of their differences, at neighbors helping each other through difficulties, at a community that chose love over law, I can see that her fear of chaos was misplaced. The real chaos came from her cruelty. The real order came from our compassion. Emma's heart monitor still beeps softly beside her bed at night, but now it sounds like a lullaby instead of a warning. It's the sound of a life being lived fully, of a child who survived not just a medical condition but also the cruelty of someone who had forgotten what it means to be human. And in our neighborhood, where weathered gray fences are perfectly acceptable and medical equipment is welcomed as a sign of life being preserved, Emma Rodriguez sleeps peacefully, surrounded by a community that will always choose her heartbeat over their property values. Because in the end, that's what love looks like. The simple recognition that some things, like a child's life, like a family's peace, like basic human kindness, are more important than any rule ever written. The beeping continues, steady and strong, a reminder that despite everything we faced, despite Linda Mitchell's best efforts to silence it, Emma's heart keeps beating. And our community's heart beats with it.